Only way up is up, right? All right. How many of you have heard about the glass ceiling? Show of hands. Pretty much everybody. Okay. How many of you have heard about the maternal wall? A lot fewer. If you've ever noticed that there are fewer women in an office, probably not this office, but many offices, or fewer women in a boardroom, fewer female coaches on a sideline, maybe even fewer professional female athletes after the age of 30, I want you to think about the maternal wall. It's hiding in plain sight. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, the maternal wall is a term that is used to describe the subtle discrimination that women with children face in the workplace. And there's another term for this too that shows up in the workplace. It's called the motherhood penalty. And this comes from research that has shown that women with children get hired less, promoted less, paid less, and yet expected to do more simply because they're mothers. At And Mother, we want to reverse the motherhood penalty. We were born in the world of sports. My co-founder, Alicia Montano, is an Olympian. She's a runner. And as a professional athlete, she came out bravely just over 2 years ago to write an op-ed in the New York Times about her experience that she faced when she went to her sponsors and told them that she was having a baby, and then another baby. And for those of you who haven't read the op-ed, it wasn't a positive experience. And what she thought she was doing, writing about her story, was she really thought that she was just lifting this curtain and showing this mismatch between a marketing message that says, girls can do anything, so dream crazy, and the reality that the brands were practicing, which was, women need to stop dreaming when they want to have babies. And I can sense the eye rolls. I know everybody's wearing sunglasses, but I can see a few. And what happened was, again, Alicia thought she was just sharing her story and the story of fellow professional athletes. Other stories came out. Allison Felix shared a similar story that she had. And what happened, though, was that women came out of the woodwork from all different industries. She heard from lawyers, from pilots, from doctors. I'm a scientist by training. Scientists. We all saw our stories reflected in hers. And we all realized that this is a pervasive issue. This is not uncommon. This is not relegated to one industry or another. This is systemic. It's everywhere. And Mother was formed just last year, perfect timing, yay pandemic. And the goal was to transition this movement that was started, this community that was started, into impact. We're starting with the sports industry, and we'll be expanding out as we grow, but we're starting with the sports industry because, yes, this is the space that we were born from, but as we've seen, sports is a great microcosm for the problem. And it's also a great way to test the solution and look at the cultural shift opportunities, because the cultural norm is a big part of what got us here to begin with. One of those things is this myth. There's a myth of motherhood as a career killer. You see this in sports, you see this in other industries. In sports, it's based in these assumptions about what the female body is capable of, or how a mother should be spending her time. And the reality of it is that there are invisible sand traps that have created this myth and made it self-perpetuating and self-fulfilling. And these invisible sand traps have nothing to do with what the female body is capable of, and they have nothing to do with how a woman should choose to spend her time between mothering and career. There is a forced choice. Women are forced to choose, or the choices are made for them. And as a result, the mothers go missing. And the cycle that is perpetuating this myth goes around again. In sports, one of these sand traps, these invisible sand traps that we want to reveal and discuss and address, is that when women come into childbearing age or decide to start a family, And honestly, that come into childbearing age, it doesn't even matter if they want to start a family. This is professional athletes. It's decisions, again, that are made for them. What happens is these sand traps are, women can lose sponsorship opportunities or have their pay reduced simply because they're starting families or, again, reaching a certain age. And if you're losing a paycheck, how do you pay for childcare when you need to train? How do you pay for anything you need to do to train? How do you excel in your job when you already have the system stacked against you? On top of that, showing your motherhood, showing that you are a mother, revealing this, sets you up for these financial repercussions. So how do you ask for the simple things that you might need? Like time to recover postpartum, or needs when it comes to family support, travel, lactation support, physical therapy, again, back to this postpartum time. How do you ask for those things? How do you excel in an environment when you're constantly afraid of those things? At And Mother, one of our objectives this year is supporting athlete mothers to help them break out of this sand trap. So we are supporting women specifically right now. One of our programs is supporting women who are training for the Olympics, training for the trials, and going to the Olympics. And the $10,000 would go directly into our maternity and family support fund that we are using to fill the gaps that exist in this space, to pay for that childcare, to pay for that postpartum recovery, to pay for the family support needs that women are afraid to ask for, so that we can identify the gaps, show the solution, and show that there is a better way to do this. We need to set a better precedent. And this all comes full circle because this summer our children, and in sports in general, our children are watching. Our girls, our boys are looking at role models, and we get to redefine who an athlete is and who a mother is and show that it's not mutually exclusive. We get to show the men and women in decision-making positions that these are not mutually exclusive. Mothers, it's a value add. It's not a liability. You can be and mother and still be the same woman you were before. The gender equity gap will never close when the motherhood penalty is slowing the progress and the maternal wall is blocking the path forward. So help us bring it down. Thank you.
You had talked about the maternity fund to help, essentially, if I understood correctly, help cover bills that the pay gap otherwise would not allow them to pay for. Can you also speak on your strategies to help women have these conversations with the decision makers?
Oh my gosh. Oh, yes. I mean, this is kind of, we're new in this game, but that's in the advocacy space of what we're doing kind of on the side. There's two levels of it. One, we are, by lifting the curtain in some ways, it's kind of showing the gaslighting that has been happening for years for women to think that this is their problem and their thing to do alone, and showing that there's other ways to look at this. And one, we don't want, what we want to avoid is to have that responsibility be on that vulnerable person. How can we help other people speak with them and for them and boost them up instead of making them be the ones that are in more? Because we know that's where the repercussions come, is when they show their motherhood and ask for these things. It's like, oh, well, it's such a pain to have you have a room by yourself because you have a baby now. Like, that's an extra $100. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? But to put that pressure on them, we just want to relieve that. And so we've done a lot of kind of like coaching up or like writing things on behalf of people where right now, I mean, I'm like stressed and I might start crying, but there's like this ongoing fight that we're fighting for a breastfeeding marathoner that's already qualified for the Olympics, but might not be able to go because her nursing infant is a spectator, and spectators aren't allowed.
Oh my God.
I will cry if I think about it too much, but yeah, so we're doing that on the side. So and with Alafine, who's the marathoner, we actually already have a maternity, we have a support grant for her. And the idea was like, what do you need? We just say, what do you need? Like, this can go to whatever you need. Childcare, do you want us to figure out if you're gonna be pumping? Can we send milk back and forth? And then she was, this horrible email that came back that's like, I don't even know if I'm going. I don't even know if I can go. And we're like, still, the money is yours because you're still gonna be doing work. But being now in this community, it's like, how else can we go to bat for you? And then in the long term, the idea is, how do we get standard contracts to provide pregnancy and parenting protections? How do we ask brands and hold them accountable to step up and show that, like, women are the consumers, mothers are the consumers, so how do you actually treat the women that are in your employ? So there's a lot of layers there. I hope I answered that question. It was very roundabout.
How do the athletes find you? How do you find them? How do they get to apply for the program? And like, how many are you trying to serve in this relatively quick timeline to the Olympics?
Yeah, it's such a quick timeline. I mean, for us, we just started this year, and so we're kind of starting really small. And with Alicia, because how her story has reverberated, we've slowly kind of grown our athlete mama community. And so a lot of them have found us, or we've been connected to them in that way. And so we've just continued to kind of put out this broad call of like, what support do you need? Like, here is the link to apply, like, here is, what we're able to offer and like the range. And as we raise more money, we're able to cover more women or cover them in deeper ways. And so it's really just growing. I mean, we do have what we call our core athletes. We have 3 core athletes that we are able to financially support this year, thanks to an early donation that we had. But we want to kind of be able to expand that out with these smaller grants to just. And I think the other thing of it is this community building, and it is this like this. Even though it's not a huge chunk of change, right? It's a small piece, but it's also the acknowledgement that paying for childcare or paying for these things is an expense that is worth covering so that you can do your job. And I think this is a broader thing that you're even seeing this year across the country. I mean, there's this whole call for childcare as infrastructure, because what this year has highlighted is that if you burn everything to the ground with childcare and family support, like, the women suffer. We lost so many working mothers this year. It's like, that's what keeps me up at night. So, yeah.
So in addition to funding Olympic athletes, do you have a plan in place for expanding the advocacy and making the advocacy more public?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things we have in the works is, we're starting, so what we call kind of our pillars that we're working towards. This individual support is one chunk of what we do. And they all interweave, because the individual support is the identification of the gap, showing that we can fill the gap and what it looks like to do support. So this is one part of the story. But on the other end is this narrative shift, this change in representation of who is an athlete, who is a mother, doing, telling these stories. And then on the larger scale, it's really looking at what does it take to shift an industry, to make this standard. And so for that, this comes into that contractual language change. So we have, as like a baby step towards that, we're going to be coming out with just general boilerplate language that any athlete can take. It'll be publicly available. They can take it. They can insert it into a contract. If that is already too much of a barrier to ask for these things, we're working towards like, what does it look like to make this a standard that is just part of a protection? What does it look like to lay out what is required to support a woman to excel like late into a professional career, and hold brands accountable to that? So whether that's, creating an index or a certification, what are all the paths that we can use to create change in this industry? And then along the way, like building the template. What if we learned with how we've approached sports as the first industry of change, and then almost replicate that in other industries as we grow, hopefully.
Hi, thank you so much for your important work. As a working mom who has had to pump and dump on a work trip or pumped in a supply closet, I thank you. My question is somewhat related to Jen's it seems like you're taking more of a grassroots, bottoms-up approach. Is there a thought towards taking a more tops-down approach where you're really partnering, with corporations or industries, really tightly?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think where we want to go, it really is the partnership realm. So with there is something that we're in the works with it is another nonprofit that is also in the gender equity and sports space, and we're working closely with them to look to how to hold brands accountable for protections for that mismatch between marketing message and actually what they do in practice. And then I think, expanding out, we're also looking at, again, more on the nonprofit side in terms of partnerships and programs that we would do. But with corporations, I mean, it's tricky. We do have one brand partnership that we started that we're doing the boilerplate language with the contractual, and to show that this is also coming from a brand where they're like, this is what we are, this is in our contract, this is what we're doing from now on, and then have that publicly available. So we're already working in that space. We're brand new, so we're really honestly figuring it all out as we go. So, but yeah, we hope to find our place in that balance.